There's a difference between, for example, a fact and a story behind that fact.
How do you leverage AI in your research?
The pandemic happened and we our revenue ended up being half. Our quizzing team was called Nexus. It was in fact called Holy Nexus to kind of make it clear that it is not unholy. We're hoping to make inroads into the UK market, for example.
And is Amitabh Bachchan still doing the seasons 15 and 16 or is somebody new?
This is not a kind of forum where you'll sledge the other person for not getting an answer.
Hi, welcome everyone. I'm very happy to have our guest Venky with us today. I'll share some memories of Venky from 25 years ago, 24 years ago. I always remembered him to know the most obscure facts. Like in a batch of 2000 of around 180 people in a 2-year MBA course, he was the guy who always seemed to know the most obscure facts. And guess what? He made that his career. So the guy has been involved with quizzing all his life. And we have a WhatsApp channel. I keep hearing that he's meeting Amitabh Bachchan, he's supplying questions to him. And it's so good to see someone make their passion their career. He founded a company based completely on his passion, that was quizzing. And today we'll get to know more about his journey over the last 24 years. And welcome, Venky, to the episode. And thank you for coming.
Hey, thank you, Vikas, thank you, Migs. I'm usually on the other side of this, playing the role that you guys do with a lot of video interviews. So very happy to be on this side, and maha thrilled that a couple of guys from our batch have actually started off this initiative, and so very happy to be here.
Yeah, welcome.
Venky, welcome. I want to, since Vix mentioned an obscure fact, it's like one of those facts. I use my kids say that you keep telling us things which are useless for us in life. So I have this fact which I sometimes share with people that did you, and you probably know this, but did you know that the Atlantic end of the Panama Canal is west of the Pacific end of the Panama Canal?
Right?
So,
Though,
so that is my
though, though,
most useless fact of the day for you, in case you didn't
yeah,
already know it.
yeah, always useful to keep collecting facts like this. You never know when they'll come in use. Nothing's ever useless.
Good. So Venky, how about we kick off? Tell us about your last 25 years of a career journey. But before we get on to that, tell us, you came to IIM Bangalore. What made you come to IIMs? Where were you before that? And how did you prepare?
That's a pretty interesting and very serendipitous type of journey. So I'll take your indulgence in a few minutes to narrate that. So I grew up in Chennai, studied in the same school all my life, Padma Seshadri, widely regarded as one of the best schools in the city, if not in the country. And actually, today I have the privilege of going back and working with the school quite a bit. The first, I think, in a series of many radical and people would say sometimes irrational steps that I took was to choose the commerce group in 11th and 12th and not the sciences, which left many people ranging emotions from aghast to mildly surprised on why I did something like that, because the marks were, decent, not like spectacular, but decent enough to have comfortably gotten a science seat. But I don't have a
Why
particular
did
reason
why
for
did
it.
you?
But that's a good question. I've thought back about that a bit. I really don't know at the moment. I mean, perhaps I felt one of the things I think somewhere back of the mind was this notion that perhaps the sciences are going to be a lot more rigorous in terms of consuming time and study time and so on. And I was already into a bit of extracurriculars even then.
So Padma
Right. So
Shishadri, is that a co-ed school or is that like a boys' school?
it's a co-ed school. It's a co-ed
Okay,
school.
so some good girls were going in commerce and you decided I'll go in.
That question I will defer to answer because I don't want to incriminate myself. But yeah, I mean, multitude of factors. Perhaps that was one of those. But I took commerce, and I was still, like I said, I was in the extracurriculars. I could never make my school quizzing team though, because it was really one of the two teams that I wanted to make in my school, the quizzing team and the cricket team. I could never make both because both were extremely competitive and highly coveted to make. I was in the school debating team though, and a bunch of other things. I would, generally stand up and like do an assembly in charge kind of thing if somebody had to step in for something like that, or like stand up in the class and monitor it or whatever. Those types of things I would do. So that led straight to a BCom. And the path at that time that I had known was that path led to becoming a chartered accountant, because that is the only thing I had heard of. That's the only thing people generally did as a career trajectory. I already had a cousin who had done that. So I knew of that. I thought that's what I was going to do. A lot of the people, interestingly, from school, it is one of the big CBSE schools, would typically go into the evening college of one of the three or four prominent colleges in Chennai to do a BCom. Because, there was this great race to do everything really fast. So if you went into an evening college, you could do those days what was called a CA articleship right from your first year. That would be a piece of cake if you studied in CBSE commerce. And then by the time you were in your second year of BCom, you would have started your articleship for chartered accountancy. And by the time you finished your BCom, if you had been good and in your first attempt you could have cleared your inter, so effectively within a year and a half of finishing a BCom, you could be a chartered accountant. So there was this mad rush, and everybody would go to evening college. I, however, went to day college because again I realized that look, 3 years of college is going to happen. Might as well make the most of it. This was a boys' college, by the way, Miglani. Before you ask the question again, this was Vivekananda College. This was a boys' college, and the day college route was essentially so that I could, you know, kind of take those 3 years somewhat easy and continue this whole, quizzing plus type things that I wanted to do. I'd say in hindsight that was an interesting decision because that's where my quizzing bit really picked up in terms of not necessarily being a not that I hosted quizzes at the time, but participated in a lot of quizzes when I was in my BCom. And 3 years of BCom was going on perfectly fine with this route to becoming a chartered accountant. When in my second year, my quiz teammate was a third year, right? And he was doing third year BSc physics. So we'd become like good friends. We were quiz teammates and so on. So he said, Macha, I'm going to go and like write CAT. Said like, what is this? He's like, no, there's this IIMs and all MBA. You should. This is the thing to do. I'm going to go give a good shot at it. I'm going to write it, and you should also do this in your third year. The third year December is when you can actually write this exam. So he wrote it. I was in my second year. He wrote it when he was in his third year. Unfortunately, he didn't clear it, or perhaps now I don't remember. He didn't get the IIM that he wanted or whatever. And so he buzzed off and decided, saying, "Okay, let me go. I'm going to go on and do an MTech." So he went off to IIT Madras to do an MTech. I was by the time in my third year, he had left college. And I said, okay, chalo, I should also now try this since Srini has tried it. Srini was his name. I gave it a shot. Those days, I don't think there were any actual physical coaching classes at all. I might be wrong, but the
So
common
this
thing I
was
realized through
1997. Is that correct?
this is
1997.
1997.
And how did you know what to prepare, what kind of questions and all that? Did someone guide you, or
Didn't
was it
know.
Srini? Srini already
No,
told you
didn't
of it.
know. He gave me some idea and he said, look, there's this IMS postal coaching type thing. You sign up for it. They'll send you a docket of stuff, but you have to be like very diligent about it. You have to shut yourself up in a room and like read and prep and all of that. I said, okay, fine. Okay, let me give it a shot. And then he said, if so they had this package where they would send you all this material. And then I think if you got shortlisted wherever, they would give you some GD and personal interview coaching and things like that. So I got that. Even then, I was very kind of slightly cocky and sure about the fact that I'd do well in the English parts of the exam because I'd been a fairly voracious reader all my life already. That came from the both the school as well as at home. My father used to read quite a bit, so there used to be like a bunch of fiction novels, at least no deep, non-fiction type stuff, but there used to be like pulp thrillers and fiction novels, and these really racy James Hadley Chase covers. If you've seen them, where the plot has nothing to do with it, but the covers really racy. Those
Yes.
type of books used to be at home, and the usual your standard fare of Robert
So
Ludlum and Tim
were
Follett.
you or your family avid travelers also? Because all these James Hadley Chase are typically railway platform books, aren't they?
They are we were not so much avid travelers, but two things had happened. One is my dad had worked like he was a civil engineer when he was working, so he'd worked a little bit outside the country and worked in various cities across India. Even through my growing up days, there were many times when he was posted and he would take up a project and he would not be in Chennai necessarily. So I think his collection grew like that. And the other is, of course, even though we were in Chennai, we had family across the country. So I have, you know, an aunt still in Bhopal. I had like my mom grew up in Cal, so my grandmom and family were in Cal. We had relatives in Delhi. So summers, every summer would mean to going to one of these locations. So to that extent, there was that travel. There weren't fancy holiday trips to Shimla or even Kodaikanal or Ooty or wherever, but these trips would happen, right?
Right, right.
So,
So Venky, there's
so,
one
so
very important point you mentioned, that you were a voracious reader. You read a lot, and therefore you found CAT easy, or you thought that you might not need so much of preparation. Was that true? Did it really help, like reading comprehension in CAT, and maybe even the English part where you have synonyms and meanings of words and things like that? Did your reading habit really help you? And would you tell someone who's preparing for CAT, because English is still English, maybe some question formats might have changed, is that something you'd recommend, and what would you tell them?
hey, look, I don't know whether to put like one-on-one causality to these things, but I would definitely, in any case, recommend that everybody read. And it doesn't have to be that you have to read something very highbrow, high funda. It doesn't have to be Shakespeare. It doesn't have to be, some non-fiction biography. But I think cultivating the habit of reading, I think definitely I would say helped me be more at ease with some of the things. And combine that with a natural sense of some level of curiosity and so on. When I say that, I mean, even if it's as simple as you read a book, you see a word, you don't know what it is, and you make the effort of going and looking it up and figuring out what it is. I think it's a great start. I'd say that that helped me, if not with anything, my confidence in the verbal and RC sections in CAT.
Yes.
That plus the prep, I think was super useful. So
And the prep was
to
IMS, purely
the
IMS. Is
prep
that
was
correct?
IMS, purely IMS.
And you
That's
didn't
it.
do
No
anything else at
coaching,
that
no,
time.
nothing
Right,
else, nothing
right.
else. No coaching, no
And what about
classes, no
maths? Were you
teacher.
naturally gifted with maths and quantitative stuff, or did you have a lot of uphill battle there?
Uh, I'd say bit of an uphill battle. I mean, in the sense that I was not bad at math. In fact, in my school, in the commerce group, those days there weren't too many options with CBSE. At least our school didn't offer a non-math option, and it was a bit of a struggle for there was a 43 people section in the commerce group, one section for commerce. I comfortably topped math, and even in the boards, I think I made enough to uh, be very close to the toppers of the science groups in math. That was school math, and I was good at that. In college, there wasn't that much math in a BCom course. Uh, so it's generally okay, I think, but not, certainly not like a top draw or top level. So I think most of the effort of prep went into certainly into math and DI at that
So
time. And
did you not ever get daunted that was, I'm a commerce maths topper, but I'll be now competing against all these IIT engineers and you name them?
I mean, look, I'll actually, in hindsight, I'll say if I'd known the full picture of what this is and who are the others writing that exam and what the percentages are, I'd have probably been daunted. I really didn't know
Right.
much at that time. I
So
said,
this is a
you
clear
know,
case of ignorance is bliss, and it
ah,
helped you maintain your confidence. Don't
yeah,
overthink.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, totally agree. I mean, I think I just went in saying, let me give this a good shot. We'll see what happens. And along with that, I mean, I obviously then read up and researched a little more. So applied to a few more, MBA programs as well of like tier two, tier three business schools also. And I said,
Mhm.
let me give this a shot and see what it is because, like I said, I knew that the English parts were going to be up my alley. I was also fairly confident that if I went through, I should be able to give it a good shot in like a GD at least. If I didn't know much about the PI part, but the GD part, I said, look, I've debated, I've spoken in school, I'm comfortable with the language, communication skills are definitely a plus. So the good chance that that should move forward.
Hmm.
So IMS happened, CAT happened. I wrote the paper. I wasn't sure. I had no clue how I had done.
Hmm.
Didn't have a particularly elated feeling, nor was I like crushingly disappointed or anything. I said it's probably gone okay. Let's wait and see what calls come, etc., and so on. I'd applied to a few other places. I think NMIMS, I remember, was one of them, and I think for some reason, School of Management, Pondicherry University was one of them. Probably was taken up with the fact that everybody from Chennai used to go to Pondicherry for what those days. So or even these days. But then the calls happened. So I got calls from B, C, L, and Indore. Four calls out of the six that were possible those days. So I didn't get Ahmedabad and I didn't get Kozhikode. but I got Bangalore, Calcutta, Lucknow, and Indore. The two of the interviews were in the Calcutta and the Lucknow interviews were in Chennai at a hotel. The Bangalore and the Indore interviews were in Bangalore at the IIM campus, right? Uh, so I remember how the other interviews. I mean, I remember roughly how all the interviews went. The Lucknow interview was kind of neither here nor there. Some few questions, this that. The Calcutta interview was rather more in the face, saying, "You're not an engineer. How come you're here?" Type interview. What business do you have as a
How dare
BCom
you
fresher
apply
to
to
sit
IIM
in this
Calcutta?
interview? How dare
How
you
dare
like
you
come into
apply to
this
IIM
room?
Calcutta? You commerce people.
Correct. That was roughly the sense of the interview, and I was like, "But you shortlisted me," type thing. Uh, the Indore interview I thought like went really well because it was. I mean, I obviously don't remember who the prof was, but it was a very engaging, very detailed political type discussion. Those were the times when like the government change had happened. If you remember the late 90s, 96, Vajpayee was in power, and then 99 they came back to power again. So this was like 97. So 97, early 98, whatever. So it was fairly tumultuous times going on, and like there was a very deep, passionate politics discussion, is what I remember. And I spoke my mind and said what I had to say, and I came out thinking, I've cracked this. This is like brilliant. That was Indore. Though they did ask this one question in that interview saying, if you get, how many calls do you have? If you get any of the others, will you take it? And I said, I think so, yes, because I'm in it just started at that time. The Bangalore interview was most interesting. It
Yes.
was, I think, it was a panel of two, three people. Professor Ravi Anshuman was there, who later taught us advanced corporate finance, and in like a very interesting full circle. I'll come to that later and remind me if I missed the point. Uh, what happened during campus, but it it was a I think there was some problem solving, some standard accounting concepts, commerce, this that type of stuff. And then he was like, "What are your hobbies?" So I said, "I do crosswords and I quiz." So he said, "Okay, let me ask you a crossword clue." And he asked me some random crossword clue. And, I mean, a cold solve of a clue like that when you're sitting in an interview, I just couldn't. I said something. I don't know whether it was right, wrong, whatever. I said something. And then he said, "Oh, quizzing. Okay, so what topic do you like in quizzes?" I said, I'm a big sports nut. I follow cricket a lot. Let me ask you a cricket question." And he asked me some cricket question. And I gave an answer which I thought was right. And then he laughed at me on my face and said, "Ha, ha, ha, that's completely wrong. That's not the answer. Some other person's name is the answer." I was like fairly aghast, saying, "Sir, this is my life that you're kind of playing with," type thing. But yeah, anyway, I mean, it happened. But the one amazing thing that happened is just walking into that campus to do that interview was like just, it was an indescribable feeling. I was just praying then that if this happens, I mean, this is just amazing. It was also because it was not that I had, gone to any other campus, in fact, right? Because the other interviews had happened in a hotel. And my own undergrad college campus was a small, modest, building very much in the heart of the city in Chennai, but not like an expansive campus like what we had. But yeah, so that was the amazing thing. I remember that one of the former guests on the show, Rashmi and I, were at the same panel, or at least we were kind of interviewing together at the same time. I think we were not on the same panel, perhaps, but we were interviewing together at the same time. And yeah, so I got the expected rejects from Calcutta and Lucknow. I got waitlist one from IIM Indore, and I I got the seat from IMB. I got the seat, and of course, it was conditional to you, clearing and getting a certain, I think, percentage in your undergrad. The undergrad results
Yeah.
had not come right by the time we joined. My first 2 years marks were very good, but in the third year, I think a combination of this prepping for CAT, doing this last bit of extra currics, etc., and a little slacking off, it meant that I'd written one paper in my third year, my corporate law paper, and I was really shitting. I thought, boss, it's very likely that I might not clear this paper, in which case my admission will get rescinded. Uh, but there had been like friends in Chennai who had said, "Achan, don't worry, it's okay. We have some ways. If you don't clear the paper, we'll apply for revaluation. We'll do something and we'll make sure that you clear it and all that." Thankfully, none of that was needed. I managed, and paper got cleared by some margin, and so that was that. So that's the 97 to 98 wala journey effectively,
So that's very
or whatever.
interesting. You got into IIM Bangalore, the campus you fell in love with on first sight, and you didn't get in some of the supposedly lower ranked IIMs like Indore and Lucknow, and Calcutta at that time was similar, maybe even slightly higher in terms of a pecking order. And what's even more surprising, you didn't get a call or an interview call from Kozhikode, and that would
Yeah,
have been the second batch. So that just
yeah,
shows. I know nowadays people still think that it's a black box, but at least they know their percentile and all that. What people don't realize is that 25 years ago we had no clue. We
yeah,
absolutely didn't even know how we've performed and why some IIMs are calling us and some others aren't calling us, and so on.
yeah, absolutely. Total black box. I mean, no idea of like what was the basis, why, why A did not call, why K did not call, why C and L called, but on the face of it, rejected immediately, all of it. Yeah.
That's almost like the YouTube algorithm. You don't know why some videos get more reach and some just completely fail, which we are only learning
Oh,
now.
believe me. I am also learning that because I put out content on YouTube as well, and it's bewildering why something works and something doesn't. So,
Yes, yes.
So you were going to
Good.
circle back to Professor Ravi Anshuman. Something happened on the campus.
yeah,
What
no.
was it, Venky?
So what I was going to settle back was that, obviously I joined as a BCom fresher, and all you guys were like at some stratospheric level, and I was keeping head above water most of the times to clear my courses. I quickly realized my passion. I was doing well in all the marketing courses. Of course, my among my proudest moments, and again, there's a circle back to that as well, was the management accounting course, Manac 1, in the very first year. It was the very first course. A namesake prof, S. Venkatesh, taught me. Today, I end up doing a lot of work with him. He's dean of the business school at Shivnadar University, and I'm going to be doing some work with him even like 10 days from now. But that was the course in which I topped the final exam, which was a very tough fund flow statement to crack. I think beating out five CAs who were in the class. Uh, so I think that was one very high starting point. But after that was what I can only politely call a decline in the academic performance that happened, even though I was doing, I did okayish in all the marketing courses. I think I never got an A in the first year. I got my first A in the advertising course, which was in term 4. And finally, having successfully stayed making B minuses and C pluses all this while, I finally decided in the sixth term I have to, Professor Ravi Anshuman was offering an advanced corporate finance course, which I had no business taking, absolutely no business taking that course because I was far from it. But I said, चलो ये course तो लेना ही है, 6th term में electives भरना है, we'll take this course. And he's the man who ultimately interviewed me when I got into campus. I took it and got my first and only D across my 6 terms in IME, you know. So so that was really the full circle that happened. Uh,
But Venki,
anyway,
I really appreciate, and I think this goes beyond. It's like sometimes you have to come out of your uh, sweet spots and just to learn something new, or even out of curiosity. And the way I see it is like, I mean, at that point, I mean, an A or a D is just an ego boost. Beyond that, you've probably already placed by then. The grades are not going to matter too much beyond IIM or for any other matter. And you learned something which you didn't do one more marketing course which you're going to anyways learn on the job as you join. So yeah, hats
yeah,
off. I think that was a very good decision in my whether it had been a C or a D, it wouldn't have mattered, does it?
yeah, yeah. Certainly not. Certainly not. Yeah.
So the cricket question that Professor Ravi asked you during the interview that you supposedly got wrong, did you actually get it wrong or was he just pulling your leg?
I have a feeling I was pulling my leg because I remember coming back and trying to check. I mean, there wasn't ubiquitous internet those days to check it out, but I remember the question vaguely being something about the last Australian captain to come to India and win a series or something like that. And I don't remember it exactly. I remember my answer. I said Kim Hughes, and he said it was wrong. I was fairly sure
Would
it
it
was
be
right, but
Steve O then? Wouldn't it have been Steve
No,
Waugh?
no,
Didn't Steve Waugh
no, no,
win?
it was not. I think he put some cutoff. Something. It was like pre 1980. Something. It was. It was where Steve O was definitely. It was not a Steve O type answer. It was like having to name somebody from the 80s. Is what I roughly remember. 70s or 80s. I don't
Right.
remember the exact
Right.
question. Anyway, that was what it was.
But Venki, you know what I'm thinking now? That probably Professor Anshuman would have had like not a great interview experience. He had put reject, and then he saw you on campus. He's like, "Oh, how did this guy make it? Okay, that is a sure shot D. Oh, he's taking my course. I remember."
Very possible. Very possible. Yeah.
So, what
Yeah.
else? Tell us about your IIM Bangalore experience over 2 years. Are there two or three high points of it, or any other D points of it?
Uh, hey, lots of high points. I mean, I think the for me it was a very unique experience for in multiple ways, right? So I was uh, among the youngest in the batch. I joined as a BCom fresher. There were very few freshers, especially non-engineering freshers then, uh, and I'd barely seen the world outside Chennai. Had not really
How
did
old
not
were you,
have spent.
Venky, when you joined?
I was actually not yet 20 because actually my birthday is coming up in a couple of days. So I was, as we record this video. When I joined, I think 1st July 98 is when we started. I was still 8 days short of my 20th birthday, right? So, and I'd never lived outside home ever.
You were born in
And
78 then, that means
that's correct. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think I was among the handful of
July
people in our batch, probably.
July
Yeah, I
78.
was
Yeah, I
July
think there
78.
were only two 78s. Most were 77 or 76. That
Yeah,
was
there
the
were, I
common.
think, early part of 78, there were some people, there were lots of people, 77, 76, I think. I
Hmm.
remember that there were two people probably younger than me, Manish Rachoya and Lakshmi, but I was pretty much regarded as the youngest. Also, I was like, whatever. I, I was fairly scrawny and didn't. Everything was new for me. I'd never stayed outside the house. I didn't know people from any other part of the country ever. Uh, is a fairly unitary culture in Chennai where I'd grown up. The only thing I had going for me which was kind of very antithesis to a Madrasi or a Chennaiite, was that I'd grown up watching, because my mom and dad had lived in various parts of the country and my mom had actually grown up in Cal. I'd grown up watching a lot of Hindi serials and movies. So I could speak some level of Hindi. And that was the only thing that was there, that was going. And but the 2 years were, I mean, today when I look back at it, two things that I think I would always be grateful for it for the immense level of confidence that it gave me, the fact that you've made it here, and therefore whatever happens from here, this is something that's going to stay with you. And I think while you don't go about shouting out from the rooftops about it, let's say 25 years later, still the fact is that especially the kind of business that I am in, people are like, oh, you went to IIM Bangalore and you decided to start this. That automatically kind of sets a base bar in terms of whether people look at it as a proxy for quality or professionalism, or whatever it might be. And the other is, of course, the friends made there. All the closest friends today are still from there. Like I was saying, I threw a party just few hours ago, which was all the entire audience. The attendee list for the party was people from the 2000 batch, and all of you guys, and the way the network has immensely helped me. I think, like, there have been people who've kind of gone out of their way to help, to connect, to open doors, all of that. I think beyond anything that was functionally academically learned there, uh, it's it's all very easy to kind of discard and dismiss everything you learned academically, saying I'm not using any of that. I'm not sure that's exactly the right way to look at it. A lot of it is like very foundational, ingrained, and like kind of gives you a way of thinking, I suppose, more than anything else. That's how I look at it. I may not remember, Black Scholes option pricing formula, or even, some four quadrants or four piece of marketing exactly, or some Kotler concept of theory. But I think it was the first time that I was exposed to a kind of learning and thinking that I had absolutely no uh, exposure towards. Uh, to that extent, I think that helped, and some of that has obviously stayed through the years. So great memories. I think the low points were as they would be, academically in some courses, the stress of sometimes not doing well, uh, understanding and remembering at all points of time that I had come in, with a loan and a liability over my head. I mean, I had not even taken a structured bank loan. Six of my relatives very kindly decided to chip in the fees for every term those days, and I knew that that was actually worse than taking a bank loan, because the obligation is not just financial. I mean, there's no financial interest obligation, but the moral obligation is therefore very high, right? So those things were there, but yeah, I mean, I would look back at it and say life changing, great time, learned like learned survival, you learned a whole bunch of new things, made some very thick friends, and earned a proud badge that kind of stays with you through your life.
Lovely. So
Yeah,
you have
Venky,
this financial and moral obligation, Venki, which brings us to the next point is the end goal of, at least from an IIM, is to get placed. So tell us a bit about your placement experience, maybe how where you did your internship and where you applied and got in. How was that process like?
Yeah. That was also quite memorable. Uh, so kind of through a
Yes.
combination of accident, design, enthusiasm, etc., figured out that marketing was the way to go. Like every one of us who did marketing at that time, like the dream was to do HUL or PNG. Uh, Applied for it in my summers, cleared got shortlisted, cleared they had, I think, some kind of a test, cleared that, cleared the group discussion, went for an interview, did not get summer internships with levers. PNG though wasn't shortlisted at all. Finals happened, applied for a whole bunch of, did my summer internship in Philips finally. A very interesting summer internship, reported to Pune, went to a very fancy company apartment in Koregaon Park, then went to their, factory setup, which was there in, I think, the Pimpri Chinchwad area those days, and was sent promptly out through searing summer of 1999 to do a black and white television market survey across what is now Chhattisgarh, coastal Andhra Pradesh, and interior Tamil Nadu. If they had to pick three places which would have been the hottest at that time, I think they picked those three. So I did, I did places like Raipur, Bilaspur, Ambikapur, Baikundpur. These names still stay with me. All of it going by like some local bus from place to place, and then some Vizag, Vijayawada type places, I think, and then Tanjavur and some interior Tamil Nadu places to do essentially a survey on black and white television, how the market space was, which brands were leading, what features were customers looking for, things like that. So very very interesting. I mean, obviously, it was like a quote unquote hardship project. But I remember
Mm.
coming back, and there were some others who were also like equally passionate about marketing, who'd end up getting placed in places like banks, right? So HSBC and places like that. And so they obviously had a relatively cushy summer internship, because they would go sit in an office and do like whatever study analysis reports, graphs, etc. And then when I came back, I remember someone telling me, keep pause. So y- you have to gain the real marketing experience by doing a project like this. So I got placed fairly late in summers. So Phillips happened. Uh, those days, of course, again, whenever you do your summers, the clamor is to see if you'll get a PPO, whether you accept it or not, at least for the ego boost that you'll get. I kept waiting. That never happened. Uh, and then I applied for like all the marketing companies that were day one for finals. So which was Levers, PNG, Asian Paints, Coke, Pepsi, ITC, I think a couple of others. And barring PNG and one other, I think got shortlisted in everything, even with grades which were not great at all. I think four-term CGPA was used for applications, and I was at 2.6, if I'm not wrong. It was pretty bad. Even then, I got a lever shortlist, and people were like, this is probably the lowest CGPA with which Levers has ever shortlisted anybody on campus ever. Again, I cracked the group discussion or so I thought, and gave the interview and didn't get the job. This repeated one more time when I went and applied for Levers. Once again, got shortlisted for an interview, went and interviewed with them, and still didn't get the job. 3 years into my working career. So that was not a love story that was meant to be. But I had like I think 4 interviews, and I had a Cadbury interview. I remember I thought it went well, but I also came out and got to know that they were informally telling people that we're going to take you, so we'll make the offer at the end. Don't accept anything else. I had an ITC interview which I thought went off really well. Again, same story, didn't get anything. I'd had a Pepsi interview and I think one other interview, done, no offers. All the other guys in marketing were like pretty much were like out there to get marketing jobs, are all placed. I was like head down, trudging back from, I think the placements happened at the MDC block, and I was coming back to the hostels saying, Chalo, we'll see tomorrow, whatever comes. I think some advertising agencies were coming the next day, a couple of media companies probably, and a couple of more marketers and so on. When some placement rep ran up and said, "Hey, Pepsi is calling you back. Do you want to come back?" So I went back in, and they had a bit of a chat, and they said, "Are you sure you want to do this? And if you make you an offer, will you accept right now?" I was like, "Yes, I will accept it immediately." So they said, "Okay, done, good." So I was like, "Yes, Pepsi ho gaya." I came out. I come out, and the ITC interviews had just gotten over, and one of our seniors was an ITC, walks by and says, "I heard you got placed in Pepsi. Congratulations. We had you in mind, though." I was like, "What?" And then he later comes back to the hostels and says, "Yeah, we had you. We would have made an offer to you, but uh, I said, but you were like kind of indicating to the others that you were going to make offers to them, whereas I got no such indication." He was like, "Yeah. We were like one slot we were just waiting to fill, and we thought we would make that offer, but by the time you had got replaced with Pepsi." So I was like, "Okay, great. Moral victory, if not anything else." And that's how the fairly 24-hour stressful placement process at campus happened, and Pepsi happened. And that's how I started my career, starry-eyed in FMCG marketing, though it was anything but that after I started, as I soon kind of realized. Yeah.
Right. Which brings us to the meat of our discussion points is tell us about your career IIM ke baad. So now you've crossed IIM, you've taken us to the point where IIM ke baad starts. Last 24 years that you started your career with Pepsi, as you said. Can you give us, before we go into the details, can you give us like a 3 or 4 minute summary of where all you've been, which companies, which
Yeah.
geographies, which functions between 2000 and 2024?
Sure. So Pepsi was the starting point. I spent 2 years in Pepsi, almost exactly. A combination of circumstances, and I had to leave. The next gig was so Pepsi. I was largely in while initial reporting, induction, etc., was in the headquarters in Gurgaon, which was rather not the crazy place it is today. Uh, I was largely posted in Tamil Nadu. I was working out of Madurai and a little bit out of Coimbatore. Then I moved to a small, what was called a reputation management company, which is essentially a brand consulting stroke people consulting firm. Worked with them for about 3.5 years.
What was the name of this company? It was based in Bangalore, right? I
It was based in
remember.
Chennai and Bangalore. It was started in Chennai. It is a company called Image Equity. Uh, Started in Chennai, and I moved to Bangalore, set up their Bangalore office, and
So what
worked
was the reason
there.
from going from Pepsi to a much smaller company? Was it like you already knew you wanted to do a startup and that was your step towards
Yeah,
that?
perhaps. Like I said, there were a combination of circumstances through which I ended up uh, exiting Pepsi. Right, too much lurid detail to go into at this point of time, but suffice to say that a bunch of things had happened, and I had to move out. So I was interviewing. Uh, so while I interviewed with this very small company, I mean, it was like I think less than a 10% company at that point of time, and there was nobody in that company with anywhere near, uh, the creds I already had at that time. But I found it interesting, and it didn't phase me particularly that I was going to join a small company. In fact, it was fairly exciting for me that this would come with the opportunity of doing a bunch of completely new things, all
Mm.
of which centered around communication and content at some level, which I now realize was some kind of an underpinning of interest that I had possibly at some point of time. It also gave me literally the opportunity to almost be entrepreneurial, I would say. Right, it was almost like an entrepreneurial stint. I was signing up clients, I was negotiating retainer contracts with them. I was also you know creating strategy on how to build brands through media. I was They had a very interesting program where which was a people energizing fun at workplace program, and I was actually stepping up and anchoring and executing some of those sessions because I just stepped in one day when the guy didn't show up, and then I realized how much I love it. I started doing that. Those kind of things happened. So the move
And how
itself
many
wasn't
years
like
were you at Pepsi before you moved into this?
Pepsi. I was there till for about close to 2 years, almost two
Okay.
years,
And then you
two
mentioned
years.
that you interviewed with HLL second time. So this was the time when you interviewed with HLL?
I interviewed with Levers again. Yeah, that is correct. That
Okay.
is correct.
Yeah.
After Was it then, or I forget whether it was then or whether it was the end of this stint. But either
Mm.
ways, I mean, it was one of those times. Uh, because it is very tricky to come out after 2 years from a tier one FMCG company and actually get in anywhere because the companies follow like a fairly standard pattern of management trainees coming in at that level, and then either you stay that course and move on, and then you make your move after say 4 5 years. Right, 2 years in, I couldn't be taken in as a management trainee again in let's say Marico or some company like
Some other
that.
yeah, tier one, yeah.
Yeah, but they couldn't fit me into uh, like a territory manager role straight away either because I'd not had enough experience. And similar even with some of the tier two. I remember one tier two company finally offered me like a two levels below customer executive type position because they really couldn't. There weren't any vacancies to be had as a at a
Territory manager.
managerial level position. Yeah,
Mm.
so, so, so I said it's okay. I mean, I tried the small company and learned a lot in the process. A lot of to dos, a lot of not to dos. Lots of things about people and culture. Even if it's like a small team, 3 4 member, 5 member team that you're working with, I think the intensity sometimes gets very high, right? And in smaller companies, the in general the intensity is very high, the passion is very high, the hands-on approach is very high. All of that happened.
And did you have
So it was
equity in this company or did you join just as an employee?
no, I didn't have equity. I
Okay.
joined as an employee and worked as an employee. uh, I don't know. I mean, looking back at it, some people at that time, I remember others saying that it was a completely kind of irrational decision because when I joined with a significant pay cut as well
Oh my God.
from my Pepsi job. Yeah, but I somehow, I don't know what it is. I felt drawn to it, so I said I'll do it. And to be fair, I was back at like uh, you know uh, my normal pay within 6 months of joining
Mm.
this company because I think even they recognized possibly the value I was bringing to the table, or why this was going to be interesting for them, and so on. And I never kind of paid heed to too many of these other things, and just decided to go with the plunge and just
And
did
how did
this.
that company end up doing? Did that end up becoming bigger,
Uh,
getting
uh,
acquired, dissolving?
Unfortunately, no. I worked there for about 3.5 years, and yeah, little more than 3 years, and then kind of it took its own path, and I think ended up winding down
Mm.
over the time. Yeah, many small agencies, I think, uh, end up with paths like that. So unfortunately, it didn't grow to be like a behemoth company. Uh, but the founder kind of reoriented and is doing some other stuff
Mm.
today.
Mm.
From Pepsi. I mean, from this Image Equity, so Pepsi was a very large company. Image Equity is a very small company. I
So tell me
again went
this
back.
this
Yeah.
job transition that you did from Pepsi to Image Equity, did you like was there a point where you didn't have a job? You were looking for a
Hmm,
job, or did you find
yeah.
the Image Equity job while at Pepsi?
No, I had a little bit of a point. I think a couple of months when I was not in a job,
Mm,
a month or two perhaps when I was
mm,
in between jobs per se before I found this. But that hasn't happened since. That was
mm,
possibly the only stint. Because from Image Equity, I moved to this again to a fairly large company and in a space I had absolutely no exposure to, which was telecom engineering. So I
mm,
joined this company called Saskin in Bangalore. So
mm.
Saskin was like a telecom technology product
It's a
and
German
services
company, right?
company. No, no, Indian company, very much Indian
Okay.
company. Started in Bangalore, started in Domlur, in fact, which is where global headquarters are still. And I joined them again. I had no background. I was not an engineer. I didn't know tech. I didn't know telecom. But the marketing head there kind of said, "Listen, you're of all the people I've met, your communication skills are possibly in the top 1% of all the people I've met so far. And I think that alone is enough. I'll get you in, and I'm sure you'll learn on the job." So that was, I think, Saskin was in my career the longest. Uh, Close to 4 years, really coherent corporate stint, if you would call it that, where I did I was lucky enough to do a variety of things. I joined in like a large bids sales kind of team. Then I kind of moved into being part of the marketing team. So I was doing some communications and marketing work. uh, we did like we would do the company had just gotten listed. Again, of course, I missed the stock option wave. As I joined, the company was just going to get listed in like a few weeks or something, so they'd stopped giving out stock options and so on. But yeah, so I was in marketing. We would do like the reason I brought up the listing was one of the things I remember we would do, and which we got like accolades and awards for, was produce a very innovative and interesting annual report every year
Mm,
as part of the marketing team. But from there, I moved into, someone at the senior management team decided that we are now listed. Let's give investor relations like a real push. And so I was a sales guy doing investor relations, right? So I was talking to uh, brokerage houses and funds and trying to tell the story of the company. And again, I realized the numbers matter, but the numbers matter lesser than the story itself. And so I was kind of I was on road shows with the senior management of the company, often in Bombay, often in Delhi, meeting all these people would come to our office in Bangalore, and we would tell the story and build the story of why this was a very innovative play in the tech telecom space and so on. So along the way, understood that really well. And towards the end of that stint, ended up in again in a sales role, leading sales for one of the divisions of Saskia. So those
which
three
division
and
was
a
it,
half
Venky?
this was what was called a network engineering division. So it was about working with operators who'd set up telecom towers and offering bunch of services around that. So it was the slightly less glamorous part of the company in the sense of this being telecom ops as opposed to the rest of the company, which is doing hardcore R&D work on telecom or building products that would go into mobile phones and things of that nature. But so again, if I look back at it, the interesting thing was even in this 4 years, I think I ended up doing like two, three different things, which were not just deeper and deeper in the same function or the same department or whatever you might call it, but fairly kind of varied in their nature. I mean, I don't think anybody in any organization would necessarily have done marketing and communications, investor relations, and sales during like a 4 year stint that they spend at an organization.
And
So
also,
I,
most
I
of these
That
things
sounds very much.
they seem very hands-on.
yeah.
Like producing an annual report by a marketing guy. That sounds unique because even now when I read sales annual reports, they are pretty bland and boring. So, and from then on, going on to say that, look, we'll run investor relations. Usually those are run by finance guys. And again,
finance
here
guys. Yeah.
taking a sales and marketing approach to investor relations. That's interesting. Usually, telecommunication sales is done by engineers, and here we
Yeah.
have a sales guy doing telecommunication sales. So looks like people
Yeah.
have always noticed that you bring something extra to the table.
So
I
I'll
would.
give you an
Yeah.
example that for the last many years as a VC. So whenever I invest in a company, I like to tell the CEO that, and these are not publicly listed. So the investor reports are much more concise and to the point. But even then, I'd like to tell the CEO uh, that, what, get your marketing guy to actually write it out. I don't want your finance guy to write only the thing and factual, because what the finance guys do, at least in my industry, is they will first show the P&L, then below that they will basically verbalize the P&L in their own way without giving
Right.
the insight on what's behind the numbers. So sales
Right.
increased. I mean, seriously, I can also read the numbers and say, yeah, sales increased. Okay, but why did it increase? Which product increased? And why did that product increase? Is what I want to know. So that's where the marketing guy, and to be honest, till 2 minutes ago, when you were talking about your investor relations, I thought this was my own brilliant innovation, that marketing guy coming from an ex-marketing person like me. But no, I think Saskin was probably way ahead of its time. And yeah,
Yeah.
How
I mean,
is
investor
Saskin done,
relations.
Venky?
Sorry. Say again.
How has Saskin done over the years as a company?
Pretty good. Yeah. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. It's like a fairly, without being spectacularly growing and like at jaw-dropping type numbers. They've been like a steady growth company and a very steady stock as well in the markets. Yeah.
I mean, I think the stock, if I remember right, and I've not recently checked, but maybe a few months ago, I think it has tripled in the price in the last 4 5 years.
Correct. It has had its like, yeah. Uh, there was a change of manager. There's a very dynamic CEO who was there and so on till
Yeah.
recently.
Yeah, I
He
thought
just moved on.
because I used to have Sasken shares long, long ago, and it just
Mm,
went sideways. For about 10 years,
yeah.
it just went sideways between
Yeah.
about 2008. And I remember that because 2008, when I came to London, I largely liquidated my stock holdings, and Sasken was one of the few shares that I still held. And then
Mm,
8 or 10 years later, it was still at the same price. So it was like a
mm,
lost opportunity. And then I
mm,
sold it, which is why I
mm.
feel bad, because after I sold it, it has trebled.
So, Mix, let us know next time when you're ready to sell a
Yeah,
share.
next,
Okay.
yeah, I was just going to say, just keep us posted when you're selling next time.
See, I
Uh,
sold, like I said, 90% of my shareholding in India, which I had built in the between 2000 and 2008. I
mm,
sold
mm,
in about July 2008. You
mm,
know, Lehman happened in September 2008. So you can
right.
say that my timing was perfect. Of course, I was trying to get some money to do an MBA, but that's another story. I got out of the market at the right time.
At the right time, at the right time.
Yeah. So Venki, 4 years in Saskin seems like four different jobs. Is that what held you on to Saskin as your longest employer? You just kept moving, didn't have
Yeah,
time to think about the change.
I suppose so. I suppose so. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's kind of what
So
So,
happened.
Mix
finally,
looks
what was
like
the catalyst
2 years
that
in
you actually
Pepsi,
thought?
3.5 years in this brand management, personal brand management company, and then 4 years in Saskia.
4 years in Saskin. Correct, correct. So that brings us to roughly 2009.
Hmm.
Uh, and after which I ended up doing two startup stints again.
Right.
One again was with a telecom device company that was just entering the Indian market. Uh, that was a short-lived stint. The company kind of gave it a good shot, but never saw real light of day in the market.
Do
But
you want
that
to
was
share the
again,
name of that company?
sure, it was a company called Peak Mobile,
Peak. Okay.
PEEK. So came into India at that time with the premise of doing push email as the predominant functionality over data networks. Push email was
Yeah.
not the ubiquitous, taken for granted thing it was in those days. So we're trying to build solutions on top of uh, uh, Peak had its own device as well. So it was a device come software play. And the idea was to tie up with the network operator, launch the device, and the device would do a bunch of data only things. It wouldn't do cellular
Yes.
voice, it would do data only things. and there were some interesting use cases for potentially enabling Salesforce reporting and automation. Things which required uh, quick responses, which were heavily reliant on email and forms and things of that
And
nature.
were you the employee number one in India for Peak Mobile?
No, no, no. It had already
Okay.
just been started up by someone, and I was part of the early team. Worked to try and make this launch happen, and worked with them for a very intense about 10 months. After which it became clear that it was kind of we're going to run out of funding and it wasn't really going to go anywhere. So I exited, and my former boss in Saskin, who had been the sales head, had started a company, which was again in the largely in the tech space, doing tech around services, largely a little bit of original product play, but largely services play around collaboration technology and things like that. So again, he had been kind of asking me to join. So I joined there from Peak, worked with them, worked with some large MNC customers who were there. By then, I'd gotten a reasonable hang of how a tech services business would run. So I was VP sales. So I was in charge of we were doing a couple of businesses there. One was to try and help uh, uh, overseas companies in the technology space enter and kind of set up in India. And the other was a tech services play. Worked with them, and while it was going well, my boss there one day came up and said a very interesting thing to me. He said, "Look, I I know you're doing this, and I know you're doing okay, whatever. But I can clearly see that you're not passionate about this at all. This is not what's clearly driving you." And in fact, he made this particular point after, by the time my quizzing had kind of caught up and I was like avidly quizzing and, doing all of these things, I'd met a friend whom one of our batchmates, Prasan, introduced to me, saying, after I'd moved to Bangalore in the mid 2000s, Prasan introduced me to him saying, "Hey, this guy works in my company and he also seems to be interested in all this quizzing and is looking for some teammate. Since I know that you quiz, do you guys want to like get together?" And that's how I met Vivek, who's my current business partner at my firm. And we'd kind of been doing, some informal stuff together, and I'd been quizzing and so on. So in in that uh, in that second startup I worked in after Peak, it was called Above, a bunch of versatile entrepreneurs, ABOVE. Uh, I was conducting some internal quiz one day, and I think after that is when my boss came up to me and said, "The passion that you just showed doing that, I think you know this is doing this tech sales or sales is clearly not what is like you're passionate about. So why don't you go and do something you're passionate about, right?" I was forever grateful for him. He didn't say it in a manner of saying, "I'm going to fire you." He said it in a manner of saying, "Hey, you really should go and do something that you're passionate about." And he said, "I know you'll do okay here so long as you're here, but you take your time. But I think you should go and do something that you really like." And so I was contemplating on what to do, and then the most amazingly serendipitous thing happened, because the one thing that had consumed me as a passion, which I'm sure is true for most of us, uh, from childhood days, apart from all this quizzing, reading, etc., was sports. Right? Sports was a big thing. I never played sport at any level to be proficient about it, but watching and following sport was like a deep thing. My dad was continues to be like a very avid follower of like all sport. He'll sit and watch like I mean, as we do this recording, he's probably sitting and watching Wimbledon in the hall. He sat and watched the he'll sit and watch a Ranji game. He'll sit and watch anything, and so that's how I grew up,
What's
like
a Ranji
watching.
game, huh?
Yeah, yeah,
Still,
anything,
Ranji is
anything.
happening now after IPL, or Ranji has shut down?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's happening. It's happening. It has its own share of like mad followers who still consider it the purest form of the game and sit and watch it, right? So the context to all this was one of my ex-colleagues in Saskin, with whom I'd had a lot of corridor conversations around sport, a very senior gentleman. Uh, I knew he'd played sport at some level, at some senior level those days. I didn't know the details, but he and I were in sporadic touch, and he reached out to me and said he was partnering with Indian cricketer Anil Kumble to start a company. And he said, "Do you know anyone who, would be interested in coming on board and working with this? Is like literally the employee number one position." I
And he
said,
said,
"What
"What
do you
about
mean
me?"
anyone?" Yeah, I said, what do you mean anyone? Like, please take, here is my resume, please take it. And he was like, oh, really? You want to join? Are you sure? I said, how can I convince you more? So I went and I met him. I met, the other co-founder of the company, whose one very insightful point to me at that time was, listen, I know you're like mad about sports and all that, but remember, as you come closer and closer to this and start looking at it from the inside, the glamour will veer away very quickly. And you also have to remember that you still have to do a job, no
Hmm.
matter that
Don't
it's
get
in
too
sports.
close to your idols is
Yeah,
like
yeah,
well known.
yeah. And then, of course, I had the memorable opportunity of going to the Chinnaswamy Stadium where Anil Kumble was, president of the KSCA at that time. Went into his office, had this interview with him, and joined them for like a, uh, for like a, with some clear, kind of uh, tenure and structure in
So
place.
who is the
Of
highest wicket taker in Indian team? So that's still Kumble. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
So the
Is it
company was
still
called,
Kumble?
interestingly.
yeah. Still
Is
Yeah,
Kumble.
Kumble
it is.
still
It
the
is.
highest test wicket
Yeah,
taker? And
Yeah.
who's
yeah,
the
yeah.
closest in the current bunch? The still playing bunch?
No, no. People are
Oh,
way behind him. People are
wait.
way behind.
Ashwin is possibly theoretically the closest
But
in
you
tests.
consider Ashwin as a still playing?
I mean, in tests he's still
Is
playing,
he?
not in the
Is
other
he?
formats. Yeah, yeah,
Oh.
yeah. Tests he's still playing. So
So tell us about Kumble. What's his personality like, and how long did you work with him?
I worked with him for 2 years. I was employee number one. Did a lot of things there. Uh, there was multiple facets to the business. Worked closely with him and with a bunch of national and international sports persons, building a lot of content for them, working very closely with them. Uh, it was just an amazing experience, very memorable, very professional, very very polite, very absolutely as if it would be working in any other professional organization. Uh, that's how uh, that's how Mr. Kumble runs it, continues to run it, and
What is the name of the company, Venky?
the company is called Tenvic, Tenvic. Tenvic.
Okay.
Obviously, the direct allusion was to Anil Kumble taking 10 wickets in an innings, which is the greatest feat anybody can accomplish in Test cricket. But also, kind of, marketers will be marketers, so it expanded to ensure victory. So Tenvic, right? Tenvic.
Nice.
And yeah, so that was I had the chance to work very closely with a number of uh, sports persons, and I continue some part of the work.
Drop some names, please.
Javagal Srinath, Venkatesh Prasad, Mr. Prakash Padukone, Pulela Gopichand, VVS Lakshman, whole bunch of
Right.
people.
Hmm.
Right. And,
And
and and does this mix have something to do because you're based in Bangalore? So it's like the Karnataka, maybe a bit of Andhra mixed with Lakshman. Is that the reason, or
somewhat, I
is it
also,
more because many of these are the ones that have moved on professionally into some semi-professional services rather than be just commentators and coaches?
true, this is often a point that's made that, the cricketers from the sports persons from the South generally uh, also were educationally, academically quite qualified. Like Mr. Kumble is an engineer, Jawal Srinath is an engineer. Uh, you don't necessarily find that with sports persons from the other parts of the country.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so they all had like a certain focus on, building businesses, post sport, or doing something uh, that's passionate to them, behind their heart, something on the technology side, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I mean, it was not just that. I mean, I worked closely with Akash Chopra as well, for example, who's from Delhi. It was just that mix of people who were aligned with the organization at the time, whom I worked with. It was a great experience, and
And as
not
employee number one, you got to set the culture too, and you got to set the like
yeah,
the
and I think it gave some. I also kind of. Got my hands dirty quite a bit doing a whole bunch of things which I was not necessarily straight in my in my zone. I mean, uh, I had to figure out models for creating the reward systems for teams. I had to create like business plans for sports leagues. I had to do like I had to write wet training curriculum for school kids, which is one of the things that we were doing. So we had to shoot like instructional videos for that, which was kind of directed or programmed by experts, but somebody had to like put that together. I was even, reviewing legal docs and figuring out contracts and things like that. So
Probably
fairly,
renting the first office.
yeah, I mean, that probably not, but many of the
Hmm.
other things.
Hmm.
So it is very interesting. I mean, of course, at the face of it, it was like, of course, the glamour quotient of the stint is what most people will kind of think about or talk about. I got to rub shoulders with a lot of my idols and people whom I knew and so on. But it is also very instructive in many ways in terms of how that industry works, how the dynamics are, uh, you know,
And Mr.
what
Kumble had
could
retired by that time, right?
he had retired from international cricket by then. It was the tail end of his IPL career, but he had more or less finished playing IPL as well by then, and he was like mentor of an IPL team. He was also holding ex officio positions with the State Cricket Association, with the National Cricket Academy, and so on. So he was already into a post playing career at that point of time. Uh, Indeed, as were most of the people we dealt with. But we were also dealing with a bunch of really young sports persons because one of the offerings from the company was to train and mentor upcoming, young promising talent in terms of not on the game or the technique, but on all the other, enveloping things that would happen. But the other thing that happened when I was in Tenwick, I knew it was going to be like a 2 year stint. That was roughly what was kind of discussed in the beginning as well. Uh,
But why
was
is
that
that? Because it takes more than 2 years to create something. Like, why only a 2 year stint?
there were a bunch of things I can't go into some specific details at this point of time, but it was what it was, right? It was what it was in terms of the 2 year stint. And but along the way, the what had happened is that while I was still there, purely you know as a lark, if you can call it that, a couple of friends and I set up a company to pursue our quizzing
Hmm.
passion in parallel. So we said, let's set up this company because a lot of people are asking us to like do quizzes for fun. Like people would come and say, I have a small office meetup with my team. Can you just come to the office and do a quiz there? Then
This is
somebody we knew
2012.
2012. Yeah. So 2012 February, on a very interesting date, we incorporated a company. We gave it the name that we had given our quizzing team, a name which many people sometimes say has negative connotations, which is Nexus. Our quizzing team was called Nexus. It was in fact called Holy Nexus, to kind of make it clear that it is not unholy. And so when we were starting this firm, because we were starting it off as a hobby thing, we said, look, we'll start it off and like, at least that way we can whatever little we do, and if we're going to charge for it, we can charge it under this company, and this will be like our holiday money or our like fun,
Hmm.
little fun thing on the side. So we set it up on the incorporation date on our ROC certificate is 21st February 2012, which very interestingly happens to be a palindromic date. 21022012 reads the same, left to right and right to left.
And was that
So
intentional, Venky? Was it
no,
intentional
completely
or
not
it just
intentional.
happened to be?
It just happened because anyway, you had to give in the application, and they would, it would the final approval and the registration would come when it comes, and when it came with this date on it. So that kind of, I think, in a way augured well, because that's what the company is about, trying to find interesting patterns to everything in life and make uh, teasing questions out of it, build your sense of curiosity, and kind of get you to use that as a tool to achieve some objectives that you might want to.
I,
So
I thought you might say it's 1 week after Valentine's Day, just like Children's Day is 9 months after Valentine's Day, and so on. So
Okay. That thought till today did not cross my mind, but
Okay, you can use it. You can use it and give me a royalty for that in case it works.
I I will certainly do that. I will make sure to do that in my next opening spiel that I do to my next prospect. I will mention this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we set that up, and then by end of 2012, I came out of 10 week, and 2013, I was largely kind of doing a couple of freelance consulting gigs. Somebody I knew well had started off a company, wanted some marketing consulting, marketing and sales consulting around that. And then I continued some direction in the sports space. So worked with a sports website and helped them do some content syndication type uh, arrangements as a consultant. Uh, while this quizzing thing was just like, it was there, it was sputtering on, it was just there. But end of 2013, early 2014, we realized that my I had two other co-founders at that time, and we were all kind of at, I mean, they were also at the end of their tether with their regular day jobs and things like that. And we decided, okay, let's give this a shot. So 2014 sometime is when we started working on Nexus kind of full time, putting complete focus on it to try and see where we can take it. So, and then it was three of us in the beginning, and then a year later, one of the three members decided that he had another business that he had gotten into, and decided that he couldn't run juggle two businesses at the same time. So he moved on to the other business, and then so there are two. What remained was me and my Vivek, who continues to be my current co-founder in Nexus, and that's how we kind of we started it in 2014 without really knowing where it will necessarily go. We didn't have a great business plan. We didn't have like some detailed study of the market. We had none of that. What we knew was we were super passionate about this. We knew we were reasonably good at this. The thing we had to do to kind of possibly complete that hedgehog concept was to see if we can make money out of it, right? So that's the path we kind of started on. And as things would have it, the underpinning of Nexus from day one was we'll deal with anything that involves knowledge, and we'll make it fun. That was really the goal. And at that time, the one manifestation of it, or the singular manifestation that we knew of it, was quizzing. That we would put together, quizzes, whether they are general or thematic, and make it really fun, really interesting, really engaging, and try to kind of build a brand for ourselves in terms of how we uh, approach quizzing and approach content.
Right.
And yeah, so over the last decade, of course, it's taken its own meanders and tangents and adjacencies and so on and so forth. And you know the I mean, I cannot speak to whether we've been successful on numbers and things like that, because all that is possibly very subjective. But the only thing I can say is that we are here 10 years later. So
Right. So when 10 years later, so you started this in 2014, is that right? Or
yeah, full time started running it in 2014. Yeah.
in
So
2014?
one of
Okay.
the questions, Venky, we like to ask all our guests is, how has ChatGPT changed your business? How has ChatGPT changed what you do?
Yeah,
I
it's
mean, more than
interesting
ChatGPT,
because
I'd say quizzing. Quizzing got, to some extent, to a large extent, got killed by Google searches. I mean, not just ChatGPT, because that's generative. I mean, even everyone has a phone with a Google search, so every trivia is somehow available. So does that prove a challenge?
oh, it always does. I mean, I think from right from day one, that is not a challenge that's gone away. I mean, there will be cases when you go and I mean, even now when we go and pitch to a client saying, we can do this quiz for you, they'll say, but everything is there already on Wikipedia. What will you do? I mean, why is this going to be any different? Or everything is available, like you said, at the uh, uh, at the touch of a button on the internet. It's more ubiquitous than ever. There's now, of course, ChatGPT, like you said. Uh, Look, all these will be there, right? I mean, the way we look at our business is that it's at some level there's a performance art element to the business, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's not just the content, right? It is about two performance arts. One is how do you take that piece of content, weave it into something that's an interesting story, and bring that out to you as a question, which will require some amount of a priori knowledge, but also require you to put two and two together to come up with an answer, right? So this is the one piece of it, which I would say not impossible, but we are not seeing that that is something that can be very easily replicated by anything technology at this point of time. Perhaps it can over a period of time. The
Can
other
you make
piece
it
is, of
more
course,
concrete for me, Venky? Like what you explained, it makes sense, but can you please make it a bit concrete?
okay. So I mean, I'm just trying to think of whether I can actually cite an example of sorts to try and tell you and people listening to this what I actually mean. There's a difference between, for example, a fact, right, which is uh, you know so and so is whatever it is, and a kind of interesting and the reason why that fact exists or the story behind that fact. Uh, to
I think take an
it would be
example,
the
your last quiz, one
yeah,
of your last
yeah,
performances, as you might, as
yeah,
a pick one example where you showed this reason it exists, because I can kind of visualize it.
yeah. Look, so let me ask you like a like a question, right? I mean, this is not a perfect example for the chart GPT or whatever, but just to give you a sense of the thinking. So if I ask you a question saying, in which Asian country would you find a local vodka brand called 8848 vodka? Okay, this is like at the face of it a very obscure, random question,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
How would you possibly think you can arrive at an answer to this?
Yeah.
Okay, so
I don't
I
know.
mean, do you
I
guys
have
want to
no
actually
clue
take a
what.
shot?
I'll try to zero in by saying that vodka is most consumed in Russia, so must be somewhere in Russia. And then,
No, but he
uh,
said Asian country. I don't think Russia is fully
okay,
Asian or European. Nowadays, they
okay.
are more Asian because Europe is having a war, but that's a different thing.
And then 88, the number 88 is very common in China. So
Okay,
I'll
that's good
say,
thinking.
somewhere in China.
Okay, it's not in China, but you're right on the fact that so the potential way to approach this could be that there's a number which is the name of the vodka. So
I've
8848 is
just
a
Google
number.
searched it. So shall I kill everything? I've just Google
Yeah,
searched
yeah.
it.
I mean, you Google searched it, right? So now I will tell you the logic behind getting to that answer without a Google search. It is that
Hmm.
the fact that it's in Asia and there's a number 8848. Now 8848 is like a large four-digit number, and then you start thinking
Yeah,
about what it could potentially denote, right?
right.
And why would an Asian country want to use that number as
Yeah,
a whole? You zeroed in on the 88 alone, but you look at the 8848 together. So you could then possibly think that it must be something very important in that country, which has got an
yes.
8848 significance, right? Now,
Hmm.
once you do that and you have a little bit of a priori knowledge, you'll know that the height of the Mount Everest is 8848 meters. Okay. And so once you get to that, the answer is very straightforward that the answer is Nepal. Okay. So this is the 2 3 step way of like quickly putting things that you know together
Very,
to
very
arrive at
good, Venky.
this.
I just learned something new. You just taught me the performance art behind quizzing and
So
how ChatGPT cannot duplicate this.
yeah, I mean, not in the sense. So though you could argue, like Big said, I mean, you can of course put this into Google and get an answer out of it.
No, but you can get
Uh,
an answer out of it, but you
Yeah.
can't get the thinking about coming up
yeah,
with
you
the
can get
question.
the yeah,
Those are two
yeah,
different things.
precisely, right? And so many of the other questions are similarly kind of involved in a particular manner for you to the way the question is framed is really the performance art, right? That's one part of the performance art. The other part of the performance art is of course going and asking that question, which is to be able to host that, to be able to engage with contestants and participants who have come there to take part in this, to be able to know that when there is a wrong answer that's been provided by someone, to be able to know enough to know why that wrong answer, where's that thinking coming from, and how can that be kind of reoriented a little bit, and so on. And this becomes especially important for us because a lot of the work we do is with school kids. A lot of the quiz shows that we do are school quiz shows where the idea also is, to take everyone along. And yes, it is a contest, it is a competition, but you want people to learn in the process, you want people to enjoy themselves in the process. This is not a, this is not a kind of forum where you'll sledge the other person for not getting an answer, right?
Yeah.
So those two elements of performance art at some level, and therefore the underpinning of approaching content from that angle of, can we, peel the onion and look at stories which lie below the surface? Can we bring those to the forefront, uh, and supplement the fact with why why is that the case? I mean, often I take a favorite example saying, we also run like a kind of program in some schools and so on. And one of the very nice topics that we do there is objects on flags and why they are there, right? So lots of people might know like random trivia, like, there is like an AK-47 on some Mozambique's flag. But, why, why
I didn't
is,
know till 2 seconds ago. I did not, but yeah.
yeah,
But
yeah.
this is
So,
one
but
of those
you
trivia
get what I'm saying,
that
right?
now I'll not forget. I won't forget now.
Yeah,
AK-47 on a flag and Mozambique, right? Okay.
yeah, yeah. So, but you get what I'm saying, right? So that's kind of what it is. So the answer, to come back to your question, Vix, is to we are constantly looking at ChatGPT to see how we can help it aid our business. I mean, for example, with it can give a lot of pointers towards research for us, right? When we want to kind of go deep into a particular topic and say, we have to either write up something about it or set a quiz around it, ChatGPT is a great like jump off point, to be able to ask it saying, can you recommend like 10 articles and 5 books on this topic, which kind of go into this topic in some amount of detail? Or can you share like 5 different perspectives given by 5 different people on a particular topic? And then that's like a jump off point for a content research team to use that and go further into it and research from there and so on and so forth.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's very interesting, and that kind of underlines. I've been for at least the last 2 years telling people, especially alarmists, who think that ChatGPT and other generative AI are going to take away humankind's job, and I've been telling them no, because I read this somewhere, and that line has stuck with me. Is that generative AI won't take your job? It's someone who is using generative AI who will take your job. And see, at the end of the day, I think Vix was asking about Chat GPT, which is generative. But Vix, my view is quizzing is not about generative. Quizzing is about picking out knowledge, which is more the Google and Wikipedia, and that has existed for at least 10 or 15 years in a good capacity. I mean, it has existed for 25 plus years, but the last 10 or 15 years, it has existed. It has nothing to do with uh, ChatGPT, because it's also just picking up things from using the internet, what's already available on the internet. Acha, Venki, while Vix is typing out, I have 3 questions about, and this is about your Nexus journey. So and I'll give them in reverse order. So my third question is really, tell us more about Nexus, in what shape and form it exists. Maybe like a sales pitch you would do, or just a generic sales pitch. Uh, okay, this is what we do, and this is what we uh, are good at. My second question, going one step back, is how has that your current product or service evolved over the last, maybe just a summary of how you started 2014 and then 2024, over 10 years? How has that evolved? Because you started with something and things evolve, they change, and you pivot around. But my first question, where I really want to start from, once we get over this generative AI thing, is, now this is the biggest question for any startup, any wannabe startup, is, you were saying you got a co-founder, right? A co-founder who had the same interests, Vivek, who was good in quizzing and all that. Now obviously I'm assuming that you, while you had the same interest, you also had complementary skill sets, so you work well together. One does X and the other does Y, and so X plus Y is bigger than the whole. So how does, now with your benefit of hindsight, how important is having a good co-founder for any startup, not just a quizzing startup? You've been through that, and you've lived through that, and you've seen the ups and downs, because life is never perfect, even with the best co-founder. I'm sure. I mean, there will be ups and downs. So what would you tell startup founders, other IIM alumni who want to do the journey? It may not be in quizzing, it may be in some other field, but how do you find a co-founder?
Sure.
So that question number one, I said that in reverse order.
Yeah. Okay. Uh, so I'll begin with the whatever the overall context about Nexus. So we are a quizzing and content company. The three buckets of work that we do. One is quizzes and allied contests that we develop and deliver to achieve goals which are either around brand or around people, creating engagement and credibility for brands using this as a tool or a platform. So there are several large-scale quizzes that we handle across the country, which are run by either government organizations like the Indian Navy or private brands like HDFC Insurance, HDFC Ergo Insurance, and HDFC Life, and a bunch of others across sectors. I just named some two financial sector brands, but we run it across sectors. Anybody who thinks that they can use quizzing or similar contests as a tool to create brand visibility and engagement and possibly pipeline with their potential customers. And we also run similar versions of those within organizations to create a lot of employee engagement and people engagement within organizations, working again with several companies across sectors, including several alum companies, companies like Quantify, for example, which was founded by one of our batchmates and is doing extremely well. So big shout out to them. So this is the quizzing part of the business. Then there is the content part of the business where we essentially repurpose, either originally deliver or repurpose content to make it aligned and fun, depending on your requirements. So this ranges from, in some cases, rewriting websites to creating leadership training modules to creating coffee table books to doing training presentations, and the whole works of it. So this is about trying to understand content, and this includes things like creating content campaigns which could run on social media platforms and so on. So this is about understanding content and bringing that little bit of that curiosity, fun nature to all the content that you have and repurpose and deliver it nicely. As an example, one of the really cool projects we've done around this is for a leading consumer goods company, FMCG brand. We did a very exclusive, ebook for them, which they distributed to very select stakeholders of theirs, which was a chronicling of the history of chocolate, right? So where it all began to where the market is right now, and what fun things can you do with chocolate in terms of paired dishes that you can make and so on. So
Is that Cadbury with the Boneville history?
It is not exactly the Boneville history. It was just the history of chocolate overall. Yeah, it was a project we did for Mondelez on the history of chocolate overall. So very interesting project, and we find that often clients come to us with requirements like this, even when they have agencies on board which are already slated to do things around advertising, social media, and so on, because we bring in that angle of uh, content and channelizing and delivering that content, which perhaps people find it quite interesting and a little different from what's there on the mill. Uh, the third bucket is the work that we do for media houses, where we are essentially the Q&A providers of choice for several large television shows across the country, including what you might call the crown jewel of Indian television quizzing, which is Kaun Banega Crorepati, the Indian version, Hindi version of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. We've also executed content for that show in six other different regional languages, And as we speak, we are in the third season of being exclusive content providers for KBC in India. Uh, Apart from having done a bunch of other shows across languages, across formats,
So that
we
must
are
be a big
taking,
contract,
yeah,
right, Venky?
Wait,
Like
so
being
so
it is a
let
big
exclusive.
one.
just so I
Yeah.
understand this, Venky, just so I understand this. So all questions we have seen in the last few years on KBC, you have provided. Is that right?
Yes, Nexus has provided.
And
Yeah,
and I've only seen Hindi, but you've also done for the other shows,
for the other languages. That's
for
correct.
the other languages.
Yeah,
Wow, wow,
yeah.
wow. And
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 are
and
you like
you so when did you start? When did you start?
We
Because
start
KBC has existed since pretty much 2000.
2001 was the first season, and
Isn't
for
that Siddharth
21
Basu?
years, yes, for 21
Yeah.
years, it was his company that provided. For the first 17 years, it was his company that produced and provided the content for the show.
his? Who is
And
his?
I'm sorry,
You said his company. Like
uh,
whose company provided?
Miglani just took a
Siddharth
name, so I
Basu.
was just responding to that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Oh, okay.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And so we
Siddharth
got
Basu,
the
you remember
contract
we
is
had that quiz. I mean, back in the 80s and 90s, he was like the original quiz
Hmm.
master on Doordarshan.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
of
yeah,
course.
yeah. Did he retire, Siddharth Basu?
Uh, Not exactly, but definitely, I think doing a bunch of things, not completely retired per se. So he does do a few. In fact, he did a recent program as well that came out on Sony Live. So he continues to be active in the business. Uh, he has a firm of his own, of course, and we of course have the highest regards for him because he is the, like Mick said, for anybody who grew up, he was the original quiz master on television in India and set up possibly India's first television quiz production company way back in the 80s. uh, but we've been doing this since 2022, Mix, to answer your question. This is the third season. So Hindi since 2022 and other languages since 2018.
Right, right, right.
So
I still
when
remember
you do
Siddharth
this,
Basu
when
used to
you
have this program called Quiz Time.
Yeah,
Is that right?
this time
As
was
in
very
that was
famous.
the
Yeah,
Doordarshan quiz time thing, and yeah, I never became an avid quizzer, but I was an avid quiz watcher.
of
And
course.
and listener was the Bonvita quiz that Derek, what's his guy,
Yeah,
the guy he's now a politician, I think.
yeah.
Yeah, he
Derek
used to
O'Brien.
host. Yeah, Derek
Yeah,
O'Brien. Yeah, these are the two original quiz masters that I remember
of
from my
course.
childhood.
Of course, that everybody remembers. Yeah, yeah. They were the
Yeah.
two OG quiz masters in India. Yeah.
and Venky, when you do the KBC content exclusively, providing them the content, do you actually work with the person who's presenting the show, or do you
Yeah.
only work with the backend team, or are
No, no.
you
We
like?
we we, we work closely with the host.
Hmm,
Uh, we brief him on the content. We tell him like a couple of layers of extra information that goes along with it. And of course, we have to do a lot of coordination and work with the production team. And a team from Nexus is live on set, available, and there every
and
episode
the team
of
has
the
access
show.
to the ear mic, so the ear speaker, so they can speak to the host and tell him like,
Yeah, there's only one
this is
designated person who's the director of the show who speaks to the host, but we feed that person in turn.
okay.
Yeah. So
And
this
then
is what
what's
you were mentioning, like the 8848 vodka thing from the Mount Everest, because that's the nice kind of a backstory that, say, an Amitabh Bachchan or whoever the successor would be is can feed, and that makes it engaging. It's not just the
Yeah,
question answer, question answer, question
yeah,
answer, and then
yeah,
no one is
yeah.
interested.
One of the briefs when we took over the project was precisely that, to create that layer of secondary information which would make it a lot more interesting to both the contestants and the viewers. That it's not just like you said, the question and the answer, but some level of additional information, beyond that.
and is
So
Amitabh Bachchan still doing the seasons 15 and 16, or is somebody new?
the since the promos are already out right now, I can tell you, yes, he is doing it. So we're going to
Okay.
start shoots very shortly.
And
So
what's been your experience working both with Anil Kumble, a celebrity, and then Amitabh Bachchan, another celebrity?
uh, I'll to be honest, I don't work personally. I don't work day in and day out with somebody like Mr. Bachchan. I have a team which kind of handles this project with a very senior person in the team, senior in terms of experience in this space, not necessarily by age. And he and a couple of people are the only ones who work with him day in and day out. I do go there, interact lives with him, meet him, and come back. But there isn't particular set of experiences or anything to share except to say that we can all learn from him even now, because his work ethic, his passion, his involvement in whatever he does is at you know with the caveat of his age, is just something phenomenal and inspiring, and something that we can all learn from, and constantly imbibe. So
I think Vix, what he has just said is like one of my managers and reportees actually deals with Amitabh Bachchan. I just sit on top and take his reports.
And what was it
yeah.
working with Anil Kumble?
Like I said, it wasn't, it, I mean, I did not like get the sense of working with a larger than life celebrity or anything like that, because Mr. Kumble is like very incisive, very sharp, very professional, uh, takes people along with him amazingly. Uh, I remember multiple times when we've gone to client events, and I would go along with him because I would have built the content for the conversation, or whatever he was going to talk, or whatever it might be. And obviously, as we would enter, the client would be fawning all over him. They would take him off to a separate room. He would make sure that if I was there along, or if anybody else from the team was along, he'd make sure that they get, they're treated with the same level of importance and respect that he would be treated with. And he would, he always uh, would do that, continues to do that. I have the good fortune of staying in touch with him even today, and doing occasional work with him and several of the other sports persons. And yeah, I mean, they just cut from a different cloth completely. I mean, I've seen so many cases where if anybody came and asked me for that many selfies and that many autographs, I would certainly lose it. But uh, these people are absolutely so patient about obliging all of these in terms of whatever they can, and you know making people feel really special. So that
So
is
that's
that.
like the
So anyway,
opposite of Saurabh Ganguly, who never smiles in any selfie.
I
I
won't
have a
comment on
funny
that at
story
all.
to share. Saurabh Ganguly once crossed Migs' path in a London tube station, okay?
Uh-huh.
And Migs wanted to take a picture with him, and he didn't smile in that picture.
No, he
And
he obliged.
forever,
He obliged, and he didn't smile. And for a
and
moment,
forever, his name is
I
now
was like,
destroyed.
"यार एक
In
smile तो
every
कर देता." I mean,
opportunity Migs gets, he has to mention that Saurabh Ganguly doesn't like to smile.
no, but the
And that's
but
a
the
joke.
thing was, then I went away, and then after I took the selfie, there were other people. They also realized they were probably thinking. But after my selfie, then more people came in. But I was watching very closely. Saurav Ganguly did not smile in any of the selfies, so it was like nothing personal against me.
Correct.
And we've seen some recent selfies. And
Yeah.
as in my incident was probably, I think it was about 8 years, 9 years ago, when he
Mm,
used to come as like this was before he ever became BCCI head and all that. He was just a retired captain at that point.
mm,
Uh,
mm.
but even in the more recent selfies, he just doesn't smile. I mean, that it's just personal,
Yeah,
right? It's just a
yeah, of course. Yeah,
I
I'm
mean,
sure it
he
is.
does oblige. I mean, let's be positive because he lets people take selfies because there are people who will just
Yeah,
say no. There'll be people
absolutely.
who will
Yeah,
say no.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so Migs, I'll go back to your questions also in the interest of time. I'm now realizing that we've been at it for almost 2 hours.
So, question
Uh,
two: how have you
yeah,
pivoted in the last 10
yeah,
years?
yeah. So, yeah, I think, I mean, we've just, like I said, when we started, we really didn't know what was the gamut of things that we were going to do or we could offer. We only knew that we know how to conduct quizzes or whatever at some level. And then various, various things we've built in terms of service offerings, or a couple of the products that we've built have all come through either some level of internal thinking, or very often through responding to requirements from clients who've come up to us and said, you guys are doing this. Can you can you do something like this for us as well, right? It could be something like when we began, we never knew that we would go to a customer offsite in some other country and organize like a treasure hunt for like 80 of the senior most employees of a large bank in India, at their offsite. We also didn't know that we would potentially be at a large tech conference where I would be moderating a conversation with a tier one sportsperson on how technology, AI, and cricket come together. We didn't know that we would be doing television, for example. More recently, we started. We've done a bunch of our own uh, content that's gone out on YouTube. More recently, we uh, apart from just feeding questions, we gave the content, and I also hosted a show, which was a quiz on cricket, which has gone out on YouTube and across 8 episodes has like, couple of million views right now. So lots of things have evolved and pivoted. Of course, the very difficult year was the 2020-21 pandemic year because our business fell by half that year. We had just started growing the previous year, and we thought that that was the year our business was going to skyrocket potentially. We hired our first ever, sales resource. I was just doing sales, till then in terms of client acquisition and so on. But the pandemic happened, and we our revenue ended up being half. I think even that half happened because we were able to port some of our stuff online and do quizzes online. I mean, I know of companies which used to do outdoor experiential training for corporates which just had to shut down and go home, right? Because that was unpivotable. But yeah, so we started kind of, for example, uh, becoming much more familiar with online tools and how to cleverly run online contests and quizzes and other formats during that 1.5 years of the pandemic. And that's kind of helped us today, because today in the new world, in a lot of the programs that we do, lots of initial things get run online and then culminate in something on ground. There used to be a time when if a brand said, I want to do quizzes across the country, uh, somebody would actually go and do 25 physical quizzes in 25 cities across the country, like a traveling roadshow, right? Today, no brand will invest that kind of budgets or money in it because they know that technology can bridge that gap and get a greater reach even faster. So today, when we do quizzes, sometimes we have participation from like all over the country. We have kids participating from Agartala, from Varanasi, from Srinagar, from Surat, from Vijayawada, from like pretty much everywhere, right? So those type of pivots have happened, and yeah, I think constantly we are discovering, right? So we get briefs which are very new to us. Like somebody is just an NGO has just briefed us saying we want to do a whole bunch of train the trainer programs, and we're not able to put those modules together in a fun and interesting manner. We have like some basic ideas, but we need you guys to kind of pull that together, build activities within it, and make it like a workshop module which can be run effectively. This is not something that's in our offering set per se in detailed in this manner, but this is something that's come. So now we are putting our heads around it in terms of how to ideate around this, how to put it together, etc. So I would say pivoting is like a reality of life. If you're talking about like immediate adjacencies and things that you do, we haven't like dramatically pivoted into saying that we started with this and now we are doing fintech. But the adjacencies we worked in all the way through, and now the goal is to go deeper, further. So we're hoping to make inroads into the UK market, for example, with some of the stuff that we're doing, and so on and so forth. So the aim is to. So we were obviously a two-member company that when we started. We're today a 15-member company, 15 people full time, a bunch of people on contract, so about 20 people across, working out of Bombay and out of Bangalore, and increasingly looking to deepen relationships with some customers, go wider in terms of offerings, geography, etc., etc. Right. So that's all that bit. And to answer
So
your
it was
last or first question,
the
yeah.
2020, the online pivot, which was
Mm,
probably forced at that time, even though you were doing some
mm,
part of it even before that,
mm, mm,
it
mm.
turned out to be a blessing in disguise in some
Yeah,
ways, and
absolutely.
you may not have
Absolutely.
felt like that in the first couple of years.
It did. It
Mm.
did. But it has. It has. A lot of the skills we learned then, whether it was simply navigating the business itself, the refining or sharpening the pitches that we take to people, as well as actual execution modalities in terms of running online stuff, producing our own content. I think all of that learning curve happened by force, but certainly it's holding us in good stead now. Yeah, even though I would say we're blessed and lucky to have survived and come out of it. I would consider that our single biggest achievement in the last 10 years, that we survived that torrid period and came out of it much stronger, and touchwood have been aggressively growing revenue since. But
Yeah.
that period, like you put it very well. I mean, yeah, it was a blessing in disguise, even though we didn't know it at that time.
I mean, broadly,
And
as I see it in the last 25 years, and of course, there have been more periods before that also. But in my post MBA period, for instance, there was 2000, the dot com crash. And when you think
yeah,
about technology and startup world, Silicon Valley, and all that, that was an eye opener. But the companies who survived then, they became really big in the 2000 to 2000 period. And I
yeah,
think similarly, especially in the startup world, but in any company, people who've had that trial by fire, who've pivoted, who've somehow come out at least healthy out of that
yeah,
2020 and 21 period. I think the sky is the limit, because hopefully we don't
yeah,
have as big, whether it's a pandemic or some game changer, for at least another 10 or 15 years.
yeah. Hopefully not. We call it a generational event, and we hope that it will have happened only once in our generation. But yeah, but at least
Yeah.
it's taught us that if something were to occur 15 years down the line, you know,
Yeah.
there's there's some inbuilt resilience, I think, to handle something like that.
That's right. That's right. So,
And
Venky, let's come
I'll
back to the first question, number one. When you
yeah,
started,
coming to that.
how
Yeah.
important is a co-founder? What were your experiences, and what would you tell a new co-founder, maybe a new pass out from an IIM, how to approach that?
I mean, I'm sure there will be divergent viewpoints on that. My own personal experience has been, it's been like hugely valuable for two reasons. I mean, one is, of course, you have somebody in the journey along with you, which by itself makes it, you cannot underestimate the value of that. It is huge. The other is, like you rightly said at the beginning, complementarity of skills. If that were to happen, is just amazing, and it did happen for us because Vivek is a lot more of the content ops, detail oriented, creative, design guy, and I was always the more happy to be the public face. Give me the stuff, I'll go up on stage and do it. I'll go and talk to the client. I'm happy to shoot my mouth off at any point of time type guy. So that complementarity worked absolutely brilliantly and has worked very well for us. So, I mean, while there's no like rule book on this, I definitely tell anyone who's starting up to actively consider a co-founder uh, in their business. If it's someone who can bring complementarity of skills to the table, absolutely nothing like it. And there are going to of course be periods of significant disagreement and so on that are going to happen. But I think part of the journey is also that on making sure that between the two people, one of you convinces the other, and then both go out with that same common face out to whether it's the rest of the team or the market or the world or whatever it might be, right? And behind that closed door, yeah, it might be very heated. Points of view may be very divergent. There may be even kind of very frank assessments of each other's contributions, and so on and so forth. But if you if you kind of are able to thrash all of that out and then go out with a face that's unified and clear, the power that I think offers is huge, massive, and I would not have necessarily had it any other way over the last 10 years.
Sorry, at the start, when you were you didn't originally know Vivek. You didn't grow up with him. Wasn't a buddy. You were introduced. Is that correct?
Yeah, but we had known each other for about a decade already, about seven,
Right.
8 years already by the time we started the company.
Right. Okay. So then that's a different thing, because you were like, still, I mean, whenever you were introduced, 7, 8
Yeah,
years is a long enough time to know the other person.
yeah.
Right. Would you have had the courage to have a startup with someone who you've only just been introduced, say, 7 months ago?
I'm not sure.
Is that too
But the
hypothetical?
possible answer is no.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Right. And how did you? There was another co-founder at that time. Is that and
yeah.
how
There
did you
was a
manage
third one.
that exit? Was it smooth? Uh, because there are always these problems that happen in startups, and
Yeah,
these are
yeah,
very regular problems. They will happen, whether you like it or not. Every startup will have these problems.
yeah. No, in our case, luckily it was very smooth because it was clear he was not going on to do anything remotely competitive. He had another business to run. He wanted to go and run it. So he relinquished his share of the partnership. We were a third. We were we were a equal, partnership between three people, and he just relinquished his share, and which got further split back equally between the two remaining partners. Continues to be a very good friend. He continues to quiz occasionally, and has made his business very successful. So it was luckily. I mean, I know it, and I have heard other stories where it can turn bitter, nasty, especially because, uh, in a way, the fact that it happened very early on meant that the reality of the money was a very small. It was like an insignificant pie at that time, right?
Right.
uh, when those things start becoming larger and more significant and start going from the thousands into the lakhs or the crores, or in your parlance probably the millions of dollars or whatever,
Yeah.
is perhaps when some of these may be accentuated even more. But uh, in our case, I'm sure that even if that had happened later on, the fundamental equation that we had, the three of us, it would have always been fairly amicable, and in this case, it was extremely amicable, and we continue to uh, remain thick friends, family friends, all of that. So
Yes. No. It's always more tricky when these things happen, when the, if you might call, the valuation is already huge, whether you have revenue or not, versus
yeah,
when it is like very nascent and there is nothing really. But your third co-founder, he actually told you, I don't want to do it, I've got challenging. He
yeah,
didn't like
yeah.
just disappear and stop replying to your
No,
messages and all that,
no,
right?
no, 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 certainly not, certainly not. It was a fairly planned transition, I would
Yeah.
So
say.
No,
Venky, one of
because that's also known to happen in
Right.
certain cases.
so Venky, one of my interests and the question that I have is whether Gen AI is just a statistical predicting the next word, or is it going to actually become, or can it do everything that a human mind can do, and it's just a matter of time? So one of the things that we're trying to do with our episodes is to have we have people who come from different industries, right? Industries that we have no idea about. That you come from the quizzing industry, and we want to understand from them what impact is Gen AI having in their work, and actually just share our screen and do some Gen AI experiments and
Yeah.
see if we can try to approximate, is Gen AI going to be able to do everything that a human mind can do? It's just a matter of, look, we had iPhone 1 and now we have iPhone 15. It was a huge journey. Just the way iPhone 1 couldn't do everything that iPhone 15 can do, but you had to give it 15 years. Are we on that trajectory? Or Gen AI is it's just mimicking what it has read and it can never do what the human mind can do? Now, where do I land? I actually land on the second part of it, where I actually think that Gen, uh, Gen AI can actually do everything that human mind can do.
Mhm.
And and I and obviously my viewpoint comes from what I've experienced by using Gen AI, and also talking to people and hearing other podcasts and being part of this community here. So I wanted to run some experiments with you. I'll share my screen and let me know if you can see my screen.
Yeah.
So you had that great question about uh, 8048, right? That's the name of the vodka.
8848.
8848, and then this idea about AK-47 being on the flag, I asked Jen AI, let me make the font a little bit bigger, maybe that's easier.
Yeah.
So I told it to give me a quiz question that will require multi-step thinking and knowledge of facts, putting 2 plus 2 together. Right? It gave me something about the United States. So I said, give me a question for Indian cricket. Okay. It gave me a question that in the history of Indian cricket, several players have achieved significant milestones. One of the most iconic was 1983 World Cup. And another, which was held in England, decades later, India hosted and won another World Cup. Now, none of these questions are doing what your question did, right? All of these questions are very factual. They're very there's nothing to be there's nothing that you have to infer on the spot. So I want to help out Gen AI a little bit, and I want to tell it that the answers would require some thinking on the spot and should not be simple regurgitation of facts. Now, obviously, I don't know the spelling of regurg, but yeah, I think ChatGPT will figure it out. What's your opinion about this question, Venky? Like, do you think this question would ever make it to your? Will this question ever pass your content criteria?
Which one? The one that's on your screen? Like,
yes, the one that's on my screen. Give me 1 second. So I told it that the answer should require some thinking on the spot. It should not be simple regurgitation of facts. Okay.
yeah.
So basically, ChatGPT came back and told me that here is a more complex question. In a particular World Cup, India set a record for the highest team scored in a single match. During the same World Cup, an Indian batsman became the first player to score 200 runs on an ODI match.
I think that's the giveaway, isn't it? The number 200 runs.
Okay, so that itself is an error by ChatGPT because the first 200 in ODIs was scored by Sachin, but it was not scored at a World Cup at all.
Okay.
So that itself is a factual error, first of all, in the question itself.
So let me give me the answers.
So though not a World Cup match, Sachin Tendulkar scored the first double century in ODI on Feb 24, 2010. So then why is it saying in the...
Yeah. Name the legendary batsman who scored the first double century in ODI match and the team he played against. Oh no.
But look at what it's saying in point 2 during the same World Cup, which is wrong, right?
Yeah, which is wrong. Yeah.
So these kind of things anyway happen. But yeah, I mean, what I'm saying is, look, this, like I said, right? I mean, this is a great jump off point in terms of starting to research on stuff and so on. Now, as far as quiz framing is concerned, it's something that if you ask 5 different quiz masters, they'll say this particular way of framing a question is better than another way of framing the other question.
Sure.
So yeah,
So
this will give you a lot of stuff.
How do you leverage AI in your research? I mean, something like this, what Viks is showing, would you use it as a starting point and maybe you'll phrase the questions differently? But does it do like a lot of legwork for you and then you pick and choose and think about, okay, take out the hallucinations, based on your existing knowledge?
Correct. Exactly what you said. I mean, we just discussed that even in our company's quarterly meet like 3-4 days ago. The content team came up with their experiences of using ChatGPT Pro. And the simple point was that, I mean, one thing, of course, with basic ChatGPT was that there is a cutoff period and the data that it contains is sometimes a bit dated. ChatGPT Pro kind of keeps you a little more current with that. But
Yeah.
yeah, the same things. I mean, having said it can give you like a great starting point. It can give you like loads of information to begin with. If you
Yeah.
want some stuff framed, it can, for example, give you fairly tight. I mean, one of the other things in the things that we do is to make sure that the language is accurate, proper, syntactically correct. All of that. All of that ChatGPT is great at. So it can do all of that. But yeah, I mean, it hallucinates. It definitely gives errors at various points of time. It'll give you lots of like factual, you know, types of things. But then the question will become, what is the great value of using generative AI there? I mean, this is the
Exactly.
same result which you can potentially get straight out of,
Google
Google.
and
This
Wikipedia. So,
perhaps,
so the thing
yeah,
that's what I was saying. I mean, for quizzing, Google and Wikipedia already have that. Generative AI might, in my opinion, be more relevant for you when you're writing a script. If you're doing the event
yeah,
management part of that business, where
yeah,
you're saying,
correct.
okay, write me a script, what I need to say, and then it's a starting point. You will obviously modulate based on your audience, but it'll give you 80%
Absolutely
of your
correct.
job.
Yeah, absolutely correct. So, or if I can tell it something like, yeah, if I'm going to develop some training modules and stuff for a client around a particular theme, I can tell it, give me a framework to start with. It'll give me a beautiful framework, and I can start
Yeah.
with that, and then I can pull and customize, right?
And
Question
something like
setting
I'm
is,
running a training module for Cadbury's versus an IDBI or an XYZ company,
yeah,
and then give me some part of the history. Here is my thing, and you marry the two. And that I think generative AI can give you an 70-80% correct thing, right? It's that part of your business which can get more affected.
yeah, yeah, absolutely,
And
absolutely,
you
yeah,
can
yeah, yeah.
leverage a lot of it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're right. You're right. So we're constantly looking at it. We look, uh, for example, when we began, right, we would take up assignments like somebody would come up and say, I'm starting a new app, a tech app or whatever. I want to do a GK section on it. Give me 5,000 questions across these, 10 topics that I've identified. Give me 500 questions on each topic. Okay. Today, if I were a company doing stuff like that, yes,
Mm,
my entire business could shut down because people could just as easily just type in a prompt and get all of this like neatly, coherently divided by sections. You can tell ChatGPT, give me 3 options versus 4 options, do this,
mm,
do that, it can give you all of that, right? But if you are, kind of given where we are in terms of the type of things that we do and the kind of quizzes that we do, which are, like I said, where the question framing and the question hosting are both, pieces of performance art in some sense. I'm not sure that there is a chat GPT replacement threat. That's not the way to look at it. Also, I think we are looking at generative AI, like you said, Migs, very rightly, as start off points and as things which can accelerate the work we do, fine tune the work we do, give us, great frameworks to work with. I think in all of that, it's definitely going to be helpful.
yes, yes, yes. And
As
okay,
the
so
last
what?
thing that we do when we conclude this episode is, since we've been talking about all this form of question, this framing, this, that, and all, as one new thing to do in IIM Baad, I will share my screen and show one question, and we can leave
Sure.
it there for the audience to respond in comments with what they think are the answers.
Before we go there, I want to share my screen. I will definitely go there. I want to
I
take
think
your
we should.
opinion
That
on.
that, that question, Venky, is a fabulous idea.
Yes,
Fabulous idea.
that's a fabulous idea.
We'll
Uh,
do that to like end
yeah.
whenever. Yeah.
So check this out. Do you think this question is better? This is another AI which is supposed to be slightly more intelligent than GPT.
Okay. Sure.
I think
Okay.
I can answer. I mean, he was probably not out in the first innings, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah. Correct. That's all it is, right? So.
No, but if he scored 250 and even if he was out, his average is still more than 100. So it doesn't need to be not out, correct? Like if he scored, say, 300 runs in the first inning and then he gets out, his average is still 150.
Yeah, yeah. So it says what is the minimum number of runs he must have scored in the first innings for this to occur. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
like it
He cannot
has to either
he
be
cannot
like
be out in
100.
the first innings because the moment he is out, it's divided by two, and in that case, it has to be a double century, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's either it either has to be 100 not out or 200 out.
Yes. Or 200 out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is your
Yeah, yeah.
point number three
So
to solve this that we just solved. without even looking at the answer. It's in point number 3. Set up the equation.
But it doesn't actually give me the name of the batsman. It just gives me the math behind it.
Oh, this is just some hypothetical thing that it's doing, I think.
It's not a
But
real thing.
over here it started by saying in a test match between England and Australia in
I think it's just
2020.
doing some hypothetical thing. That's all.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Let
So
me.
Vix,
So these,
I hate to tell you this, Vix. I don't think you can set up a quiz company to compete with Venky using Claude or ChatGPT.
No, that's not
That
my intent.
we're still many years away from that.
Uh, yeah, that's not my intent. But my intent is to validate my thesis that this can actually do everything that a human mind can do, which is a scary thesis to begin with, I think.
No, no, and yeah, it's scary, and I am glad. I am of the belief. I think we are many years away from that. Now, I'm
Sure.
not in the I'm not in the close circles on what OpenAI and all these people are doing right now, what their cutting edge research behind the scenes are. But from whatever I've seen, including all these core LLM models, which I try to work on a few times every week, is I don't think we are there on the scary scenario or anywhere close, at least for the next 2 to 5 years.
Venky, before we go to the last question that you're going to put up on the screen for the audience to solve,
mhm.
I want to ask you, what is your recollection of Miglani from 24 years ago?
Oh, it's not just 24 years ago. I think Miglani and I have we've met at least a few times till he was in India, because we
Yeah.
would like hang out with other friends, with Chakrab and with others and so on. So Miglani and Meli I've met, and we've broadly been in touch. And the one time I landed up in London, I was trying to meet him, but we couldn't connect in
Yeah.
2019. But
Yeah.
yeah, I have broadly kept track of what he's doing, and like I was so amazed and so jealous when I found out that the venue for the Anusmaran was at the Oval. So
No, and I think the
well done on that.
credit goes to Miglani. I remember him and I talking on the phone once, and before he had just taken up uh, the leadership role at IMBA
Alumni.
in London,
Mm.
and he was telling me that boss, we have to do something iconic, and just the vision that it has to be iconic, it has to be launched. Like it all started from the vision that it has to be iconic, and then the ducks fell into place, right?
Very
Like
nice.
it had to start from the vision that it has to be iconic.
Yeah,
If
absolutely.
it's the first one, it has to be iconic. So I think
Yeah,
it's very impressive to
great,
see that
great,
happen.
great.
But what's your recollection of him from the campus?
By campus, we've hung out quite a lot. Yeah, we have done like our usual share of like whatever you would do on campus, fun, drinks, yeah, all of that. So we've had a good share of fun, and he was also I mean we were all part of what you can now fancifully call the marketing cohort, right? So we were all doing like lots of marketing courses together. So
Mm-hmm.
And Vix,
Uh,
one thing I know where you're trying to head towards this question, but if you ask Venky, every finger that he points to me, there are like those three pointing towards him. So I'm sure he'll be more cautious.
well, I'm sure, one of my goals is to figure out who was doing the roving eye, Venky. So
yeah.
I'm collecting clues on that.
Apart from you,
Hmm.
you mean?
Yeah.
Apart from you, because some people have pointed the finger at you.
By you mean Venky or you mean
No,
Vix?
you as in Vix. Vix.
You, Vix,
No,
you.
no, I wasn't the roving eye person.
Venky, before I mean, this will be the last thing, but not the total last thing. There's one last thing before we head off. But let's put that question. What's your question for our audience? That
Audience.
is
Yeah.
going that and that because this is online, YouTube is online.
Yeah.
That you think is not easily Google searchable or
Googleable.
Wikipedia
Yeah.
searchable.
Yeah. That's why I picked this question. And let's see how it goes. I will share screen.
And while you're putting it, maybe as a side conversation separately, there is this huge and re revitalized circuit which is called pub quizzing in the UK.
Yeah, yeah. It's
That is,
hugely revitalized even in Bangalore. So,
yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know whether it was uh, as big as it always was in the UK, but I think post
mm,
pandemic it's actually been the resurgence behind pub culture. So Wednesdays or
I
Tuesdays or
hear that.
something like
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
yeah.
people actually go to the pub because of the quiz rather than the other way around. So
I've
I
heard
think
of
that's
that,
something,
which
if
is
you are
great.
looking to enter UK, is
Yeah,
to make
yeah,
yourself a brand name and an umbrella brand. That's maybe we can
yeah.
discuss it as a side
Yeah,
conversation.
I needed to anyway, discuss a couple of other things with you on the UK
Hmm.
stuff offline. So we'll do that.
Yeah, let's do
But
that.
meanwhile, folks, here is the question. I'll put it up. Tell me if you can see my screen. You can, right?
Yeah.
Now we can.
All right. I'll read the question out as well. So, one
Okay.
perspective suggests that the reason for these is that they contribute to the aesthetic style of the otherwise empty spaces. Another reason is that they offer a sense of calm and tranquility to people who may otherwise be tense while engaging in an activity. The main reason, however, according to many accounts, is that it's a safety consideration and acts as a visual separator. What are we talking about? Which should be familiar to all of you who travel. So, this is the question. Try finding out what the answer is. The answer is not just one word. It's like a short descriptive phrase would be your answer. So find out what the answer is and put it in the comment section. And yeah, the first few all correct answers will get shout outs on the next episode of IIM Baad, then possibly a special prize from Migs and Viks.
I think I'm going to put comments on this afterwards. I've usually not put comments directly except for answering people on our videos, but I think on this I'm going to take a guess, put it on the comments, and let's see what Venky has to answer.
Sure,
Do you think the winner of this might get a seat in watching KBC live?
sure.
Do you
Most
have that
welcome to.
much of a, like
Yeah,
one person to take it?
absolutely.
The first
Absolutely.
correct
Absolutely.
answer.
Yeah, sure. Why not? I mean, you'll have to
Okay, then
you'll have to get to Bombay on your own. But if you get there,
yeah.
we can definitely take you to watch the show.
Okay, then I'm definitely going to give it a very good attempt.
All right.
Okay,
You
perfect,
know,
Venki. Thank you so much for that question because see it's questions like this, Vix. You can't even Google or do Wikipedia. Forget doing all the generative AI stuff, and that's what separates the quiz masters from what technology can do. And while we've been talking about leveraging technology to get more question, to uh, add more stuff in terms of your event management and making it more interesting, I think the core of it, as we've seen from Venki, it lies in the passion. If it doesn't come from inside you, nothing else will make you a good quiz master or get questions like this just because you've read some trivia on Wikipedia. And I'm talking about people like me who keep reading trivia, and the only person they can entertain is their kids until they also say, "Ki boss, this is like too much." I mean, come on. Once they are 10, 11, 12 years old, they also start saying, "Boss, I mean, too much from
yeah, I've
them."
had enough. Yeah.
So, Venki, most of the people that you hire, they're also passionate about quizzing for content people that you hire.
The core content people, yes, but we do have a bit of a mix in the team. There are people who come in with a completely outside perspective as well to offer a fresh kind of fresh set of eyes on it, as you might say. But yeah, the core of the team is people who are fairly passionate, who are fairly accomplished quizzers and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, and hats off to you, Venki. It was a great pleasure hearing your story, and so good to hear like how you went from taking commerce in class 11 with good marks in school to doing BCom, not doing the evening classes because you wanted to take it easy, to getting to IIM Bangalore, one of the youngest guys in our class, and getting a D from Professor Anshuman, who interviewed you. So you must have thought, I made a bad decision getting this guy into campus. From there, going to Pepsi, working for a smaller company, working for Kumble, starting in Access Consulting as a side gig, and then converting into a 15, 20 people company with offices in Bangalore and Mumbai. And probably, if I can predict, 20 years out, you're probably the next Derek O'Brien or Siddharth Basu of India. So
Next.
just a fabulous journey. Just a fabulous
Thank
journey.
you so much. Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah.
guys.
So
Thank
Venki,
you.
before we sign off, and we thank you for coming on our show. Is there one last word for, especially for aspirants or current students or new alumni, that you would give with your 25 years of work ex and having seen so many companies, so much of life?
Uh, I'd only say one thing, which is work hard on relationships, guys, with people, because that can get you much further than any thing else that you think in life can. Doesn't matter whether you're an entrepreneur or you're in the corporate world or you're an investor or whatever it is. I think work on the relationships. This whole concept of uh, you know networking, not working, and all that may seem to be like something to giggle about now or dismiss now, but that's held me in good stead for all this while. It's been the ability to keep and cultivate and keep at relationships with people, not necessarily with outcomes defined that you want something out from them, but the ability to keep and maintain relationships with people across the board is hugely valuable and underrated skill. So I would say go for that more than anything else.
Very, very well said, Venki. My fundamental belief is that compounding works in two cases: in finance with compound interest and in relationships. Even those
Yeah,
simple phone calls you make, just checking into people and just being there for them, there's
yeah,
nothing like that. Like no amount of nothing can get that what
yeah.
relationships can get.
Totally agree, guys.
Yeah.
Yes, no degree, no IIM degree can get that
Yes.
if it doesn't come from you. If you don't have that skill, or at least the intent, because skills come. I mean, it doesn't take some superlative skill to be
Yeah.
nice to people, to just keep a relationship going.
Yeah.
Perfect. Venki, on that note, I will thank you so much. You've spent
Yeah. On
more
that
than
note,
two
Venki,
hours.
let me introduce you to my puppy. Come on, Krishna.
Yeah.
Come on. Good boy.
Woohoo!
Good boy. Look at it.
Yeah.
So, Venki, please make a trip to Silicon Valley. We talked
Yes,
about
we
it
spoke
briefly.
about it. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And I'll.
I,
I still need to connect you with some people who might want to do a quiz, but I think we are in the second innings of our life now. Most of us, because most of us will probably average age is still 80. 75 to 80. So
Average
most
age
of us
is
are
average age for our generation will be 90. If you, yeah, if you're all right. I mean,
sure.
one of my grandmothers passed away at 95 and 95, and the other one is now nearly 96. Touch wood.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
I mean, our generation, the average is going to go 90 plus.
Sure,
I
but if you
hope
look
so.
at the average age of Americans right now, it is 77.
I mean, Americans are on medication and burgers. So, I mean, seriously.
Sure. Medication, but well said, Migs. Uh,
Well said, Wigs.
but yeah, but
Okay,
I think
guys.
but okay. Once again, Becky, thank you so much for being part
Yep.
of this.
Thanks, guys. It was great fun.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Venki.
Cheers.
Thanks again. Yeah.
Cheers.
Thanks.